I want to welcome our audience to this L.E.A.R.N podcast. It is in these podcasts that L.E.A.R.N wants you to meet experts that can help you in your work as school leaders or perhaps partners in the education landscape. The topic for this podcast is Get Moving to Learn, and our guest is Timothy Schmidt, Sales Associate and Manager and Senior Wellness Consultant for Google. On the L.E.A.R.N website, you will find on the research page under the COE of Health and Element of Fitness, research in this area being discussed today, along with potential resources to access. Timothy, I want to welcome you to the L.E.A.R.N podcast. It is really good to have you here to speak with us about this important topic. Now, I know that you have extensive research and work background in the area of health and wellness, and that you've been instrumental in helping individuals and organizations gain greater insights on how to change behaviors related to health and wellness. Would you please share with the audience some of that background and experience?
Thanks, David. I would absolutely love to. And thank you so much for having me in this podcast. In my experience that I've accumulated, I'm very passionate about the subject matter, as I'm sure you are and your listeners are as well. So it's so good to be here. But years ago, I obtained my Master in Social Work, and I began to work with a lot of low-income families to become self-sufficient. I was a case manager at a Head Start outside Chicago. And at the time, I had a pretty serious personal health issue that took me out of work a few weeks, and I recovered. But I developed a really keen passion to assist families become healthier. And I worked with a lot of families that were stuck on routines, and I learned that old habits die hard. In really motivating the families on behavior change is about small wins and accumulating small wins, tiny accomplishments that build time over time. And then I transitioned to Fitbit about 9 years ago when Fitbit was really the only player out there in activity trackers. And I was really taken back by how simple and effective technology can be to make us healthier.
Right.
How we can motivate each other and keep us responsible for our activity. Mm-hmm. And in my time at Fitbit, I've worked with numerous schools, numerous organizations in getting employees and getting students really more cognizant and aware of increasing activity levels.
Right.
So in my 9 years, I have assisted about 100 schools in getting students and faculty working together. And in the past year or two, I've also noticed more of a direct correlation between activity and increasing focus, concentration, learning for students. So I've spoken at a few conferences in the past year or two directly about this subject matter.
Right. And I got to imagine coming out of COVID, that both not just from a kind of physical wellness, but a mental wellness perspective as well, that has been driving a lot of the conversations.
It really has. I mean, the trends that we're actually seeing from COVID, are certainly alarming. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite stats to kind of that I've come across is that it takes an average child today 90 seconds longer to run a mile than their parents did.
Wow.
Yeah. And, for various reasons, in my experience, I'm seeing that schools are pushing physical activity to the wayside. And the COVID pandemic has really exacerbated the issue.
Right.
Even more so. One study I came across showed that children today are spending nearly 8 hours a day in front of a screen.
Right.
And another study shows that in difficult times, over half of parents are cutting down on after-school activities for their children. And all of this coming together has led to increasing obesity rates that we've never seen before in children.
Yeah. And I got to imagine, that's some of the research that I was hoping you would cite in this conversation today. And I got to imagine that, somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 of those hours on screen time are at schools. And probably the other half at home. And so the kiddos are not getting as much opportunity to engage in physical care. And while that leads to obesity issues, it leads to, just overall wellness issues as well. Correct? Can you cite some information around that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we're seeing that in all of my experience, um, what we found is that increasing physical activity increases blood flow to the brain. It promotes cell growth in the hippocampus, and that's responsible for the learning and the memory center. Some studies show that the increase in learning can be 20, 25, 30% greater. And we also are seeing a more mature prefrontal cortex in an active child, which is about making decisions and juggling lots of tasks at once. And another thing I really found in my research and my experience with schools is that exercise increases endorphins, which impact mood and energy levels and can help stave off depression and anxiety and just simply make a child feel better about themselves.
That's just that information is absolutely amazing. And one of the things that occurs to me in education is being proactive rather than always reacting to things is where we want to be. And what you're suggesting to me is a proactive means of establishing a wellness program for kiddos and the adults that serve them, including the families as a whole, would really have great benefit to students, which leads into my next question, which is if a district wanted to engage in this work, what are those kind of predictable positive outcomes that they would want to make certain they communicate, that you could tell them you're going to see these outcomes? What are some of those things that they would want to communicate to their public that they would be guaranteed to see if they implemented some of this wellness programming from Fitbit?
Yeah. Well, I love this question. There's so many different ways I want to tackle this question, but right off the bat, I think that technology in a child's life and our lives is a blessing and a curse, right? And we have this massive opportunity to make technology enhance our lives, to hold us more accountable, but there are certain red flags that we really want to steer clear from when it comes to children. Okay. And something that works really well with Fitbit is we have very few distractions on our devices compared to our competitors. We have no pictures, we have no games, no social media, no texting. So parents and teachers can really rest assured that Fitbit will not increase screen addictions. And that's something that is extremely important. Another thing is some school districts come to us and they're a little bit reluctant about revealing a lot of or finding out a lot of child data that's personal. And Fitbit's schools that take on such initiatives, they only know step data. So a teacher is not going to know sleep patterns, heart rate, eating patterns, anything like that. So it's just going to be about step data. So privacy is really not going to be an issue.
Interesting. And that is predominant in a lot of school districts today. They're very concerned about it, rightfully so.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, a few other positive incomes would be, a general awareness of how to monitor your health and have children see these connections.
Right.
How does an increase in active minutes impact sleep? So we have a holistic model that we're very passionate about. So it's going to be mental health as well as physical health. And we're really passionate about sleep, nutrition, mindfulness, and activity. So our whole philosophy is, as complicated as health is, focusing on those four key principles are really going to pave the way to impact mood and energy levels. But simply focusing on those four habits are really going to pave healthy patterns for one's life.
Yeah, and I would think, based on what you're telling me, that it also improves the condition of work for the teacher just by default. If you've got that type of student in front of you, it makes the experience of
Yes.
teaching and learning just that much more enjoyable, I would think.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, it's kind of funny. You're reading my mind. Um, a lot of our schools that implement some of these programs have noted that one of the major benefits is going to be a decrease in teacher burnout.
Mm,
You know, so teachers are going to be, they're going to notice their students are more aware, focused, and concentrated. Certainly, fewer behavior problems, and that in time is going to also lead to just happier teachers.
right.
Um, you know, but outside of exercise, you know, we are extremely proud that schools use Fitbit in the classrooms to make the students more connected to each other and to faculty as well. And we view a program as a way to really break down any communication barriers that teachers may have with students and to get them to engage and connect together. And that's what exercise
Right.
does, right? In group exercise, you know, that has a profound way to impact that area as well.
It's interesting because as you're telling this story, so many schools, especially elementary schools today, are engaging in this the concept of teams and I forget the term out of um, Harry Potter, but having those groupings of kids, and I can just see a lot of fun in monitoring steps and having competitions within your teams and step monitoring could just bring a lot of joy and connectedness with kids and a lot of excitement around exercise and a great opportunity, if you will, for schools. Now, you mentioned that there is one implementation barrier, and that tends to be about concerns about privacy data. Have you seen any other kind of implementation barriers along the way as you've worked with school districts?
Yeah, so that's another great question. So the biggest one we certainly come across is cost, and you know, some school districts reach out to us, and you know, they want to know if we know of any grants or any things like that. And we know that schools do work with grants. We specifically do not recommend any. However, you know, any schools that have budget issues, you know, to get Fitbits, some schools will get Fitbits for one class. They'll let the students use the devices for a few months, and then they'll simply transfer the Fitbits to a new set of students after a few months.
Right.
Uh, when I started, got 9 years ago, our Fitbits would literally last 2 or 3 months until they'd come apart, they'd break. Now Fitbits last 3 to 5 years. Every Fitbit we have is swim proof, and you know it's really meant to be a durable device. So a child that is rough, you know, and kind of you know does a lot of like wrestling and things like that, and just moves around a lot. We expect the Fitbits to really last long. We offer attractive discounts as well for schools that make a purchase. But you know, the other big implementation barrier I feel would be a program really works better if each student has access to their own iPad or a Bluetooth pairing device. That way, they can sync the data up on their own.
Nice.
But if not, a solution can be one iPad per classroom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that tends to work out well. And then maybe like once a week, the teacher could sync up all the devices, you know, to their account by logging into each account. You know, so that the starting process is going to be super easy. But one thing we continuously see is that, like most school initiatives, they tend to go better if there's parental involvement.
You're right.
And encouragement is really, really key from parents. So, you know, focusing on healthier movement and habits are going to be, you know, effective if done during the school day, but we really need to see them done in the evenings, on the weekends. You know, parents, you know, really need to lead the way in terms of promoting healthy activity to really reach down and impact their children as well.
Well, it's got to be near and dear to your heart, considering your own experiences, that bringing the family together around this work builds that family and gets them in a place of connecting. And we do know today that
Right.
needs to be a major initiative. And if we can do that through exercise, what a wonderful way to do it. Now, I want to ask you, you've dealt with like you said, 100 plus schools in your time with this. And so how has it impacted the schools you've dealt with? And Is there any school or district you would want to cite that would help our audience connect to this work?
Yeah, I mean, just another great question. We have a lot of see a lot of positive impacts. I'd love to mention a few schools, but we've worked with a wide range of schools, from elementary schools, high schools, public schools, private schools. I feel a sector of schools that we see more than other are charter schools. Charter schools, a lot of people think they get additional funding. They do not, but they have fewer requirements in terms of how to use that funding. And charter schools often are really kind of working against other schools for enrollment. So they sometimes think of out of the box ideas or solutions, to get enrollment, to get creative, to address student issues. But rather than simply purchasing devices, successful clients will get creative with running their program. So we partner with a number of low-cost step challenge platforms. So instead of having a simple leaderboard, some of our platforms that we partner with can do a step challenge, walking around the country to go to major league ballparks. And it's a fun way for a child to see, going to San Francisco Stadium and then the Houston Stadium.
Right.
We've also partnered with a really fascinating initiative called the Daily Mile. Have you heard of this?
I'm not familiar, no.
Okay, so it's basically where clients are going to set up an outdoor space for children and teachers together to walk and run 20 to 30 minutes a day, a few times a week.
Nice.
And no matter the weather, they're going to go outside. And what they have seen is just a wide range of positive impacts on students and faculty. So what we see is that 20 minutes of intense activity, there's going to be a 28 to 32 minute window where that learning becomes optimal.
Wow.
And students are going to report to be far calmer and focused. And teachers actually are going to put their most important lesson plan after this vigorous activity. Teachers have shown that test scores have improved, but also behavior is going to improve as well. And looking just at specific examples, so long before Fitbit, I believe in like the mid 2000s, I'm located in Chicago, Illinois, and there's a very large school district outside Chicago, Naperville.
Yep, very familiar.
And they implemented a comprehensive program to really get kids in shape. 19,000 students. First 30 minutes of every school day was devoted to intense cardio. After a year, 3% of their sophomores were overweight. They had phenomenal test scores. They were 6th in the world in mathematics and 1st in science. They had no fist fights as well. So the behavior impacts were monumental.
Yeah.
And they spent less per pupil than outside school districts did.
Interesting.
Right. So it's the real world examples we see. So specifically with Fitbit, there's a charter school. Again, very unique solutions they're looking for. So there's a charter school in California that's a virtual school as well. They're called Elite Academic. And they fully implemented Fitbit into their student population with their faculty. And they set up a comprehensive step challenge platform a number of years ago. They wanted to bridge the gap between students and teachers as well, and parents. And they noticed that after implementing these programs, their children were more focused, had an easier time concentrating, and really bridging the gap between parents, teachers, and students that they were really looking for.
It's absolutely amazing, Tim. When you look at a lot of the research out there around exercise and, obviously related to health, but also to mental wellness, attentiveness, things you've cited in this conversation today, It's amazing to me that as school districts, we don't jump on that information more. And I really am
Right.
attuned to what you said, about the outdoor learning, the mile challenge,
Yep.
is that immediately following that is the best time to implement some of your hardest to learn stuff. I've not heard that before. And I think it's valuable to our audience. Now, if our audience wanted to hear more about this and see how they could implement this stuff more proactively and have a deeper conversation with you, Tim, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so simply, visit our Fitbit Health Solutions website, and we have a lot of information there. We have some case studies about what we do at schools. One more thing I really wanted to mention is that when we look at movement, right? It's really going to be, the impacts we're going to see are going to be positive combination of two things: vigorous movement, short bursts of vigorous movement, but also continuous movement throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what really effective schools are using. There's a book I love. I want to give her some love. It's a book called Move, and it's by Carolyn Williams. And I love this quote. I want to share with your audience. Trying to offset inactivity with simply a 30-minute gym session is like trying to offset a bad diet with multivitamins.
Mm. Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
I think we're conditioned as a society today as we're sedentary. We're sedentary. Let's go to the gym for 20 minutes, and then that's it for the day. So we're really looking for a combination of both of those. But I really wanted to mention that. But if your audience members had any interest, feel free to reach out to our Fitbit Health Solutions website, and we'd be certain to get back to you. And I'd love to set up a phone call and learn more about your situation.
And if they want to contact you directly?
Directly, it's just going to be Timothy Schmidt at google.com.
All right, Timothy. Well, I want to thank you for being a part of this important work of supporting our students in schools. And I want to thank you for your participation in the L.E.A.R.N podcast.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate your time. I'm more than happy to assist. And thank you for having me. I'm very appreciative.